All right, hey, what's up, y'all? Um, Chapter 16 today, Gospel of Matthew. Okay, so it looks like about 4 subheadings, 28 verses. Just get started, right? So the chapter begins with Jesus. Let's see here. Well, the subheading says, Leaders demand a miraculous sign. One day, the Pharisees and Sadducees came to test Jesus, demanding that he show them a miraculous sign from heaven to prove his authority. Jesus responds over here in verse 4, only an evil, adulterous generation would demand a miraculous sign, but the only sign I will give you is the sign of the prophet Jonah. Pretty interesting. For me, I really thought about, him saying that only an evil and adulterous generation would demand a miraculous sign. Like, what does he mean by that? And first of all, why is he sort of like tethering together evil and adulterous? Why not like evil and murderous? Why not like evil and anything else, right? Evil and adulterous. I mean, I guess everyone's free to speculate that on their own, and maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but it did kind of stick out to me. Evil, adulterous generation demand a miraculous sign. So, I mean, I guess what are they really saying? They're like, well, we'll believe that you're the Messiah if you do like a magic trick, and then we'll really believe. I wonder what they were actually expecting him to do. Like conjure fire from the sky. I guess one of the things I've heard is that, like during the time of Jesus, the Messiah that they were expecting, he was going to be like leading the nation of Israel as like an actual king, like a more traditional style king. Like he would run the government and the military. I guess like in a less spiritual way and more so in like a physical way. Like they literally wanted like King Arthur or something, or like whoever. And he was just gonna like come and like overthrow everybody who had oppressed the Israelites. Like he was gonna overthrow the Roman Empire and whoever else, and all the Jews would be free. He would just institute like perfect legal systems and like vanquish all evil and iniquity like in the kingdom. So it was like a land of perfect like peace and harmony. Like, yeah. I mean, and I would say that Jesus did do that. It's just that this is also like a common trope. The whole idea that prophecies, like, they're always fulfilled, but it tends to never really happen in the way that you're expecting it to. Like it's a trope in like movies or video games or something, right? Like the great prophecy. So I mean, I would say Jesus actually did do all those things, and he did like save the kingdom, and he did all that stuff, whatever. So Jesus says the only sign I'll give you is the sign of the prophet Jonah. Now, I actually went back and watched like a review video about the book of Jonah, just to get like a refresher on it. I mean, I guess the basic story is that like, at first, God is asking Jonah to like be his servant and go perform this duty and go speak to the people of Nineveh. But Jonah's scared that he's going to get killed. He just doesn't want to do it. So he doesn't, and he runs away from his duty, right? You could say he doesn't pick up his cross, and he doesn't let go of his old life. He clings to his old life, and he doesn't pick up his cross, and he doesn't like do his duty that God is asking him to do. And he tries to like sail away on some kind of boat, right? And then God is like, I mean, come on. So there's a crazy storm, and like Jonah's boat is about to sink. So, he gets thrown overboard, right? He lives in the belly of the fish for 3 days. Jesus. He, well, I guess it's even more relevant to say, like, Jonah, in order to save the other sailors who are on the ship with him, he says, throw me overboard, expecting that he's going to die. Just throw me overboard, I'll drown and die, and at least you guys will be saved. It wasn't right for me to run away from my duty and now get all of you wrapped up in this, and now you're all gonna die. So just throw me overboard. At least you can get away safely. And that's when he gets swallowed by a fish, and he's in the fish for 3 days, and the fish like swims him back to like where God wants him to be, like doing the duty that God wants him to do. So, I mean, Jesus says that's the only miraculous sign, or that's the only sign that he's going to give them, the evil and adulterous generation. So what does Jesus do, right? He basically says, like, well, I guess, like, I have more so questions here than to be, like, saying, like, well, matter of factly, this is how they're related. Like, I'm wondering myself, like, how do they line up? What are the similarities? Like, what did he mean? So, I mean, we all know the basic story, right? That Jesus was crucified and he was going to give up his life to, like, save the other people. And then he was, like, in the land of the dead, or he was in Hades, or he went to conquer hell. Like, he was dead for 3 days. And then he, like, rose again from the dead. And, like, Jonah was, like, in the fish for 3 days. And then he, like, was, like, spit back out of the fish. And he, like, survived even though he was, like, drowning underwater. So, yeah. I might just be looking into it too deeply. It might just be the 3 days thing. Like, that's it. Like, Jonah was in the fish for 3 days. I'm going to rise from the dead in 3 days. Simple as. While I'm over here like, well, whatever. But yeah, that was pretty cool. Is there more to say? Probably. Does it have to be said? So let's move on. Yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees, right? So this is the next chapter here. Well, same chapter, next subheading. So it says, later, after they crossed to the other side of the lake, the disciples discovered they had forgotten to bring any bread. So this is where Jesus says, watch out, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. At this, they began to argue with each other because they hadn't brought any bread. So basically, they forgot to bring bread. So what happens when you forget something that you feel like you really need? You're fearful, panicking that you're not going to have it, and you're in like a state of whatever. I don't have to use fancy words, right? Like, you feel like you need something and you don't have it, so now you're going to be like panicking. And then, that very quickly shifts into like blaming other people. Like, why did this happen? I thought you were going to bring the bread. I thought you were going to bring the bread. Well, I was going to bring it, but then, someone else came up to me and they were asking me to like sign this paper, and why were you trying to have me sign this? And I thought this and that and this, and it's it's your fault and it's my fault, and like, well, I didn't have the money to do it. He had the money, and whatever. And I feel like this is already, that is like that sort of those feelings that defile you, that come from your heart, is the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees that Jesus already is like foreseeing is going to happen very soon. He's like preemptively warning them, saying, like, as soon as he sees that they've forgotten to bring any bread, he says, watch out and beware. And then literally right after that, they start arguing with each other because they didn't bring any bread. Like, what are we going to do? We don't have any bread and there's 12 of us. Should we start rationing? Like, what do we have? Should we start rationing? Like, who should eat first? How much should each of us eat? Should the bigger people eat a bigger portion, like, relative to their size? And then, like, the smaller people should eat a less amount because they're smaller, so that way it's kind of equal? Or since there's 12 of us, we should all eat, like, 12 equal portions, so, like, we all get the same amount? Like, And this is when Jesus just says, "You have so little faith. Why are you arguing with each other about having no bread? Don't you remember the 5,000 people I fed with 5 loaves of bread, and the 4,000 people I fed with 7 loaves of bread, and the large baskets of leftovers that we picked up? Why can't you understand that I'm not talking about bread?" So again, I say, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Then at last they understood that he wasn't speaking about the yeast in bread, but about the deceptive teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. So, very cool. And I think for me, it definitely was a throwback to, what was it, chapter 13 maybe? Where Jesus spends a lot of time giving like 5, 6, 7 examples about what the kingdom of heaven is like. And at one point, he gives the parable saying that, like, the kingdom of heaven is like 3 measures of flour, and a woman added just a pinch of yeast to it, but it was enough to permeate all the dough. So it's almost like he's, there's a similarity, right? So he says the kingdom of heaven is like that. You can add a tiny amount of, this spirit of heaven, this heavenly yeast, and it will make all the flour rise up, the whole batch, just a little. And he's kind of, I feel like he's almost implying that, like, the deceptive teachings of the Pharisees and the Sadducees almost like work in the exact same way. Like, he's saying, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Just the way that it spreads, like fear spreads. There is a famous saying, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, like fearing anything, because it spreads like yeast throughout dough, I guess. I know if you want to be scientific, there's some idea about this. I think they call it like whatever, like some kind of collective delusion, like, one person gets scared and then it just spreads, and I don't know, just the basic idea of a panic, like there's not that much danger, but then a couple people start panicking, and then more people start panicking, and then you got a whole like stampede and riot, and people are really getting hurt. It wasn't that dangerous, to be honest. Like, you forgot to bring bread. What is the big deal? I can literally summon bread. Like, it's not just that, like, I have, like, you're lucky that I'm here because I can magically summon bread. It's more just like, how should I say it? Anything that you ever need, you will have. But I feel like when you're indulging in the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, it's actually harder to receive that. So maybe, like, at the very beginning, when all this stuff at the bread started and they realized that they had forgotten to bring any bread, or at that point right there, cut it off right there. Don't even panic. Just be like, oh, okay, we forgot to bring any bread. Parentheses, and that's a good thing, right? Like, we're going to have all the bread we need, period. Even though we didn't bring any, it'll be fine. We'll find something. Some very kindly stranger will just show up and be like, hey, I'm selling a new bread. Who wants to try a free sample? Or something, right? Or maybe there is a time of fasting and hunger that would be, help you grow stronger or beneficial, or it's an opportunity for whatever. So, yeah. When it seems like things aren't going as you expected, you forgot to bring the bread, don't panic. Don't get scared. Don't even worry about it. When you get bad medical news, when you get any kind of unluckiness,